Our first slide says understanding the exchange rate. And my thinking has always been that a good starting point on this topic is to go back to the basics. So if we go back to the basics of an exchange rate, then it means that we will not have problems at all. So if we can all understand what we mean by the concept of exchange rate and the different types of quotations that we find as far as exchange rates are concerned, then we're not going to have a challenge. So that is our starting point. So what's an exchange rate? Well, an exchange rate is a rate at which one country's currency can be traded in exchange for another. Or in other words, I say we can make it very simple for ourselves by simply saying that an exchange rate is a price. It's a price that we pay in exchange for a product. And that product is called 1 unit of foreign currency. So one of the easiest ways is to think about an exchange rate as a price that you pay. For instance, if you want a single pound, how much do you pay? If you're looking for a single dollar, how much do you pay? If you are looking for 1 South African rand, how much do you pay? So the amount of money that you pay for each one of these is really what we call an exchange rate. With understanding of exchange rate, there's 2 expressions that you want to take note of. What are these? This expression called the spot exchange rate and also the forward exchange rate. So we need to know these 2 expressions. So what is a spot exchange rate? A rate at which currencies can be bought or sold for immediate delivery. If the delivery is going to take place immediately, that rate is called a spot rate. So spot rate is an exchange rate for transactions where the delivery of the currency will take place today, or where the exchange actually is going to take place immediately. We call that a spot rate. We call that a spot rate. However, we have another expression called the forward exchange rate, an exchange rate set for currencies to be exchanged at a future date. So the interesting or the important thing to note here is that this rate is established today. So this rate is set today. That's when we set it. And what will happen tomorrow is the actual exchange of the currencies. So this is a rate which we set today, but the actual exchange of currencies actually will take place in the future. The actual exchange of currencies will take place in the future. That is called a forward rate. That is called a forward rate. Now we are coming to something which is probably more important. And if you do get hold of this concept, it will go a long way in helping us as we continue with our question practice. A direct quotation system. So in further understanding the exchange rate, we need to know a direct and indirect quotation system. So what is a direct quotation system? This is a system which expresses exchange rates in terms of units of domestic currency. So here we express our exchange rate in terms of what? Units of domestic currency, which are equal to 1 unit of foreign currency. Which are equal to 1 unit of foreign currency. And I've made a statement here that apparently in Zambia, that is a system that we use. In Zambia, our exchange rates, we say so much Zambian kwachas to everything else. For instance, to a single dollar. So many Zambian kwachas to a South African rand. So this quotation is what we call direct. Okay. We have colleagues from RISA on this call. Your exchange rates, how are they expressed? Are they expressed in terms of the South African rand or in terms of foreign currency? I've forgotten how your exchange rate electronic boards look like. Can you have a comment, please? Juliet, how do you express exchange rates there? Do you start with South African rand? Or do you start with the foreign currency? How do you express your exchange rate there?
We use
you start with, what do you start with? You start so many rands?
yes, we start with so many rands.
So many rands. Eh? Yeah, so then you're using the direct quotation also where we say so many rands. Down here, that's what we use also. We say so many Zambian kwachas. So the first item, which is very important in a question, is to understand the quotation system being used. Why? We are going to see shortly why we're emphasizing on this as our important point for this discussion. Favor. Two rates always quoted are the bank's buying rate and the bank selling rate. Now, this is where the issue comes in. We need to understand which rate is the bank using for buying. What is the bank's buying rate? What's the bank's buying rate? And what's the bank's selling rate? So if I put two rates between you, one rate will be for buying, another one for selling. At what rate would the bank buy? At what rate would they sell? Now, here's a nice story. In a direct quotation system, the normal rules of business apply. So, for instance, in Zambia, like today, we had something, I think it was 17.46 to 17.92. This is Zambian kwachas on a single USD. Now, the story is this. One of these rates, the bank will use when they are buying from a customer. Other one when they are selling. So which one is the bank's buying rate? Which one is the bank selling rate between these two? I've made the statement here that the normal rules of business apply. Where a dealer like the banks, they buy at a low price and they sell at high price. It makes sense then that a bank would be buying $1 for how much? 17.46 from one customer and sell to the next one at how much? 17.92. So this one is not a problem. This one is straightforward. In other words, the normal rules of business do what? Do apply. The normal rules of business. Whatever business you are in, you go and order items at a low price and sell at a high price to make your profit, isn't it? The difference reflects your profits. So if you're in a direct quotation system, there are no issues. It's a no-brainer at all. The bank's buying rate and selling rate are so straightforward. That is a point that we want all of you to pick. Now, let us move on. This table here, I picked it a while ago. This was from one of our banks, Stanbic Bank. And it was the exchange rate between the Zambian kwacha, as we can see, and many currencies, including the USD here. So this is what happens in Zambia. We use a direct quotation system. We use a direct quotation system. And that is what you expect if you come to Zambia. What's the meaning of this? The banks on this particular day, they were buying from one customer at 18.1346 and sell the next customer at 18.4954. So as we can see, there's nothing strange here. That is the normal practice. That is how the businessman or woman will make their profit, by buying at a low price and selling at a high price. What is the implication of a direct quotation system? Here is the implication. If there was a product called $10,000, here's what will happen. The bank will buy these $10,000 from one customer at that rate. So the bank would buy. So this is the buying. And the bank would sell the same $10,000 for this amount. And the difference represents the profit that the bank is going to make. So then, in direct quotation, what do you do? In direct quotation, you always multiply. To convert the value of the foreign currency into local currency, you multiply. That is one issue. That's one implication. So if you want to find the cost of any value of foreign currency, what are you going to do? You're going to multiply. You're going to multiply. That's what you're going to do. Let us contrast direct quotation with indirect. And more frequently, in the exam that you're going to take, the quotation system that you're going to find in most of your questions is an indirect quotation system. So the question now arises, what is an indirect quotation system? The indirect quotation system expresses exchange rates in terms of units of foreign currency, which are equal to 1 unit of domestic currency. So it's units of foreign currency. That's what comes first. 2, 1 unity of your domestic currency. For instance, in the UK, when you look at the exchange rate quotations, they'll go how many dollars on a single pound, how many Japanese yen on a single pound, how many euros on a single pound. This is what we call an indirect quotation system. This is what we call an indirect quotation system, where we start with units of foreign currency. Units of foreign currency. So then, what is the implication? Back again. Two rates always quoted are the bank's buying rate and the bank's selling rate. Now here's an interesting story. In an indirect quotation system, we'll do the opposite. The opposite happens. What is that? The bank buys high and sells low. The higher rate is used when the bank is buying. So when the bank is buying, they are going to use the higher rate. When they are selling, they use the low rate. But this is applicable only in an indirect quotation system. So the meaning is that when we come across a question, first we must check the quotation system. Then we'll be able to advise which one is the buying rate, which one is the selling rate. So then we come here. What quotation system is this and why? For now, I just want you to tell me this quotation system. An Australian firm has just bought some machinery from a US supplier for $250,000 with payment due in 3 months' time. Exchange rates are quoted as follows. The spot. So look at this. This company, where are they based? Australia. They go to their bank, they find the spot rate. Now you understand what the spot rate means, isn't it? This spot rate says so many dollars, US dollars, on a single Australian dollar. So these are the US dollars on a single Australian dollar. These are US dollars on a single Australian dollar. What quotation system is this one? What quotation system is this one?
Indirect. Indirect.
Indirect. So this is what it means. So what does it mean in terms of the buying rate and the selling rate? Which one will the bank use? Which one will the bank use?
The higher rate.
Okay, so the lower rate, this one, is used when the bank is doing what? This side is when the bank is doing what?
Selling.
This is a selling rate. And the higher rate is used when the bank is buying. The bank buys high. The bank buys high in an indirect quotation system. The bank buys high if we have an indirect quotation system. And how do you move? How do you move from foreign domestic currency? How do you move from foreign to domestic currency? You always divide. You always divide. So if you want to find how many Australian dollars are represented by this amount, or if you want to convert this into Australian dollars, you're going to divide. In a direct quotation, was multiplied, but here you divide. Here you divide. Okay. So this language of direct and indirect is something that you must understand well. And once you understand it, you're going to use the exchange rates correctly. Now let's come to currency risk. Let's come to currency risk. Let's see what we have.
Sorry, Mr. Boss. Hello.
Yes, please.
Before I miss a point.
Yes.
I've had difficulties understanding the indirect quotation. How do we, from which perspective should we make it easier for me to understand? Is it from the perspective of the bank, the company that is buying or selling the forex, other than from the bank perspective? Since you're saying the bank will buy at higher rate and sell at low rate, then from the customer's point of view, in this case, the same Australian company that is seeking to buy the 250,000.
Okay, that's a good question, fair question. Who is the owner of the business here? Who is in the business of trading in the currencies? Who is in this business? It's the bank. It's the bank. So the bank is the owner of the business. So when you're talking about buying and selling, we're talking about the bank. The bank is the one that is buying and selling. They are buying to you and they're selling to Mr. Piri. You have asked a very good question, actually. I really appreciate the question you have asked. So here we are talking about, when I ask you the question that, please tell me the buying rate, I mean the bank's buying rate. Sometimes I hear even locally people making mistakes about the selling rate or buying rate. When you use the expression, what's the buying rate? You are saying, when the bank buys from you, at what rate do they buy? Let's do this. Let's come here. Here. Have you seen that? Have you seen this table, which I got from law? Have you seen this? Have you seen that?
Yes, sir.
Does that clarify it further? Does this help to clarify your question? So the buying and selling is from the bank's point of view. So on this day, Stanbic Bank was buying, Stanbic Bank was selling. So it's the bank, eh? Yeah. Okay. Let's come to the issue of the risk. The risk arises from fluctuation. The risk is created from fluctuation in the exchange rate. The exchange rate does not remain constant. 2 days ago, or was it yesterday, just after the Bank of Zambia Monetary Policy Committee reviewed their decisions and also gave information on economic variables, what happened to the Zambian kwacha?
Appreciated.
It appreciated. Remember, it was in the series of 18s. It came down into the 17 series. Now imagine if you had the $10,000 to convert, you would have been converting at 18. For every $1, you would have been getting 18. But within an hour or so, for every dollar, you don't get how much? 17. This is what we mean by currency risk. The fluctuation in the exchange rate, especially the unexpected fluctuations. Because certainly if you had known that this is what would have happened, and if you had dollars to convert, you would have done this much earlier, isn't it? But we never knew that after the monetary policy rate was announced, or the decision was announced, that this would actually affect the currencies. So now the question is, what causes the fluctuations? One, people just speculating, buying and selling currencies. That is one. Government action. From time to time, the government may intervene in the markets to save the currency or to support the currency. For instance, if the currency became very weak, if there was too much of depreciation, the government may move in to save the currency. Balance of payment position, the volumes of our exports and imports. The volumes of exports and imports. If you have a lot of exports, what happens? You're going to have a lot of dollars. So meaning that your local currency will be stable. If you have got more imports, what happens? The price of the dollar becomes very expensive. In other words, we expect a depreciation in the local currency. So one of the biggest factors really that causes our fluctuations, it's the import-export situation. If we have a lot of imports, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the currency. Increased interest rates. Increased interest rates are associated with a depreciation in the currencies. So currencies with higher interest rates, like our currency, where our interest rates are on the higher side, we find that also that is reflected in the value of our currency. That is reflected in the value of our currency. Just like inflation, an increase in inflation also does devalue the local currency. So currencies with higher interest rates, currencies with high inflation rates, you're going to find that they're associated with depreciation, or they are expected to weaken. So such currencies are expected to weaken. So interest rate movements, inflation rate changes, balance of payment positions, government actions and speculations. When we put these together, their impact is a fluctuation in the exchange rate. Their impact is a fluctuation in the exchange rate. When an exchange rate fluctuates, there's three types of risk that may arise. When there's a fluctuation in exchange rate, there's three types of risk that may arise. Transaction exposure, translation exposure, and economic exposure. So these are the three types of risk. And we must be able to explain these types of risk, which are associated with fluctuation in the exchange rate. What is transaction exposure? What is transaction exposure and how does it arise? The risk of adverse exchange rate movement occurring in the course of normal international trading, normal international trade. This arises when the prices of imports or exports are fixed in foreign currency. So if you have fixed your invoices in foreign currency, then we are saying that you have what we call transaction exposure. meaning this arises when the prices of imports or exports are fixed in foreign currency terms and there is movement in the exchange rate between the date when the price is agreed and the date when the cash is paid or received. If you want us to reduce the statement, you can simply say something like this. A transaction exposure arises where we invoice our customers or we ourselves are invoiced in what? In foreign currency. For payment when? Tomorrow. So this is really where we have invoiced our customers. In foreign currency. We have invoiced our customers in foreign currency, or our suppliers have invoiced us in foreign currency. But the settlement of these invoices, is tomorrow. The settlement of these invoices is tomorrow. Because in between, what can happen? In between, what we are saying is that there may be a fluctuation. There may be a fluctuation. Okay. What of translation exposure? What sort of an exposure is this one? This occurs in multinational corporations that have subsidiaries with assets and liabilities nominated in foreign currency. So if you're a company that has got operations overseas or outside your country, you have subsidiaries with assets and liabilities in foreign currency. What do you have to do? At some point, you need to consolidate these accounts into a single state of financial statement. Now, if you're going to consolidate these, you need some exchange rate to be used. So as you do your consolidation and using exchange rates, converting everything into domestic currency, there's a possibility of an exchange loss. Translation risk is a risk that the organization will make exchange losses when the accounting results of its foreign branches. Foreign branches. So when the results of our foreign branches or foreign subsidiaries are being translated into home currency or domestic currency, that possibility is what we call translation exposure. Translation losses can result, for example, from restating the book values of foreign subsidiaries' assets at the exchange rate on the statement of financial position date. The effect of translation risk is to create gains or losses in the reported financial results of the parent group. Now notice this, but they do not create cash flow gains. But they do not create cash flow gains. So your bank account is not affected per se, no, but it's your financial reports that will be affected. What of economic exposure? What is economic exposure? This refers to effects of exchange rate movement on the international competitiveness. International competitiveness of a company, and refers to the effect on the present value of long-term cash flows. The present value of long-term cash flows. Where the present value of these cash flows shrink or reduce because of exchange rate. It is a risk that over time a currency will depreciate or appreciate in value against other currencies so that the country's economy becomes more or less competitive. Let's take an example of the companies in Japan. Companies in Japan do export a lot of second-hand vehicles to Zambia. So these companies have got good business in Zambia, or had good business in Zambia. At one time, our rate was 6 kwacha to 1 USD. We could easily buy a USD here in Zambia at 6 kwacha and import a vehicle. Overnight, our rate went to 10 kwacha. That's what happened. So the dollar became so expensive. What happened to this company in relation to the portion of their business in Zambia? What happened in relation to that business in Zambia? What happened to volumes? They saw a drop in the volumes. They also saw a drop in the what? In the cash flows coming from Zambia. Why? Because of the exchange rate movement. Was there any management or business problem or mismanagement? No. It's just because the customers here are found it very expensive. What this company suffered from is economic exposure. The drop in the competitiveness of your business simply because of exchange rates movements. So that is an example of a situation. Now, interestingly, there's a statement here, can even affect a firm not involved in foreign currency transaction. Now, this is very interesting. That for you to be a victim of economic exposure, you need not be involved in international trade. How can this happen? E.g., a local firm producing for the home market without importing any raw materials could suffer if the local currency appreciated. Imagine if our local currency became much stronger in value as imports will become cheaper. So can you imagine you are a local company, you use everything locally. And then you've got a competitor here who imports components that they use. And then what happens? What happens is that the local currency appreciates. So it means that the imports will become cheaper. Where will the customers go? The customers will start going there. There. What are you going to see? What is a local company going to see? They'll just see that customers are not coming anymore. They'll be wondering, why? Where are the customers? The customers now are going to the importers. Why? Because the importers can buy these things cheaply from outside. This poor company is not involved, but is feeling the impact of the imports. Why? Because people can now import. I always call that the painful reality of economic exposure. Because here you are suffering when the local currency appreciates. So then let's talk about the solution. What do you think the solution to economic exposure? How can we manage economic exposure? You must broaden the base of customers. And suppliers. That company in Japan there will tell them that what they must do is they must have a broad base of customers. Don't just have customers in Zambia, no. If their business was just in Zambia, then there'll be problems. So they must diversify or broaden the base of customers and supply. This company also will tell them the same. Instead of just getting items locally, you must also have suppliers overseas. Import some items too. So that is one solution we can give. Another solution we can talk about is would encourage this company to improve on their cost management. This local firm would tell them that, well, maybe time has come for you to review your costs. So have in place a strong cost management system. So that because for you to compete now, you need to review your costs and to reduce them. 3, what can we do further? Brand management. Brand management is very important. Strengthen your brand. You know, if even when the prices are high, if you're a strong brand, if your brand means good quality, customers will not all run away from you to the importer. Some customers will still hold on to you. Why? Because of the brand. You have a very powerful brand. So these are some of the things that you can actually do. Let us move on to the next item. Okay, now this recording may be too long for you. So what I'll do is I'll break the recording into 2. So we'll break this one now so that you